The lights in the station concourse turned white for a second, and in that second, everything changed. I felt Vashka's grip tighten on my wrist a moment before the flash hit, her whole body already turning to shield me, because in her mind, I was the one who needed protection. She did not know yet what I used to be. She only knew the man who apologized to strangers, who let merchants overcharge him rather than start a scene, who flinched when a door slammed too loud. She did not know that man was only half of me, and that the other half had been standing quietly behind her smile for 8 months, waiting. 6 men in dark armor had walked into the concourse like they owned every inch of it. I recognized the cut of their gear before I recognized a single face. I had seen armor like that before, on a cold, rocky world called Calder's Rock, where I had spent 2 years of my life doing things I never planned to speak about again. The man in front called my old rank out loud, like a key turning in a lock I had buried years ago. "Corporal Reyes, you are a hard man to find." Vashka spun toward me, and I saw it then, the exact moment her whole understanding of me began to crack. I did not have time to explain. I only had time to say 4 words. "Vashka, get behind me." My voice did not sound like the voice she married. It was lower, flatter, older. It was the voice I used when men's lives depended on quick decisions, not kind ones. She stepped back, more from shock than obedience, and that gave me the half-second I needed. "Let me go back, just for a moment, so you understand how we got here. My name is Daniel Whitmore. 6 years ago, I was a soldier in the Colonial Defense Corps, assigned to the outer perimeter where new human colonies pressed up against unknown space. Nobody back home ever heard about most of what happened out there. It was not the kind of war people wrote songs about. It was cold and long and quiet, and when it was over, the survivors did not come home looking like heroes. We came home looking like men who had learned to say less and notice more. After my service ended, I was placed into an arranged marriage with Vashka, a princess of the Ketharu Dominion, as part of a peace agreement between our people and hers. It was not romantic in the beginning. It was 2 governments deciding that a marriage between us would calm old tensions and open new trade routes. Vashka came from a family of warriors and rulers, raised on stories of her ancestors leading fleets and settling disputes with a blade rather than a conversation. She was taller than me, faster than me, and far more confident than me, at least on the surface. From the very first week, she treated me the way someone treats a smaller, gentler creature they feel obligated to protect. I let her believe it, not because I wanted to trick her, but because I had spent years hoping to leave that other version of myself behind for good. I wanted to be the man who paid too much for vegetables at the market and thanked the seller anyway. I wanted to be the man who apologized to furniture. That man was real too. He just was not the only man standing there. Vashka found my calmness strange at first, then frustrating. She would watch me let small insults pass without response, and shake her head, like I had disappointed her in some fundamental way. "You let him take advantage of you," she said to me once, after a trader clearly overcharged us for supplies. "I saw it in your eyes. You knew, and you paid him anyway, and you thanked him. It wasn't worth arguing over. Nothing is ever worth arguing over, with you." She said this like an old complaint she had repeated many times. "Where I come from, a man like you would not last through his first season." I only smiled and kept walking. She was right that I let things go easily. She was wrong about what that meant. I had already fought the kind of fight most people spend their whole lives hoping never to see. I did not need to fight over the price of vegetables. Back in the concourse, with 6 armed men closing in, and my wife standing frozen half a step behind me, that old part of me finally stepped forward again. I had learned a long time ago, from a friend named Okafor who did not make it home from Calder's Rock, that most public buildings have particulate systems built into their walls for fire safety. If you know the right frequency, and you have something small and metallic to throw with the right motion, you can turn that system into a blinding flash for a second and a half. It sounds like a small thing. In a fight, a second and a half is an eternity. I threw a credit chip toward the nearest vent, twisted my wrist the way Okafor taught me years before, and the whole concourse turned into a wall of white light. The armed men, who expected nothing more than an unarmed diplomat and his quiet human husband, lost their vision for just long enough. I had not lost mine. I had been counting exits and distances since the moment we walked into that concourse, a habit Vashka used to call nervous and twitchy, never realizing it was the reason I always knew exactly where the nearest cover was. What happened over the next several seconds is not something I am going to describe in detail, not because it was extreme, but because those seconds belong to a part of my life I try not to relive out loud, even for people who ask kindly. I will say this much. When station security finally arrived, all 6 men were restrained, disarmed and unharmed, sitting quietly against the wall like scolded children, because I had learned a long time ago that ending a threat and ending a life are 2 very different skills, and I had gotten very good at the first one. Vashka stood exactly where I had left her, untouched, her breathing fast and uneven, staring at me the way someone stares at a familiar road that suddenly leads somewhere they never expected. "You," she finally said, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. "You have done this before. Yes. You let a traitor cheat you out of coins yesterday. That wasn't worth the trouble. And this was? This was." She looked at the men being led away by station officers, then back at me, and I watched the confusion in her eyes slowly turn into something else, something I could not quite name yet. She did not say anything else until we were seated on our connecting transport, side by side, the noise of the station fading behind us. "Why did you never tell me?" she asked. "Because you didn't marry a soldier," I said. "You married a man who was trying very hard to stop being one." She was quiet for a long moment, turning that over in her mind. Then she asked the question I had been waiting for since the day we met. "Those men, why did they want you?" I told her the truth, because there was no point hiding it anymore. During my service, my unit had been sent to deal with a group of hired fighters who had been causing serious harm to colonial settlements on the edges of known space. That group later became known as Scarrow's Concern, a mercenary organization that took jobs nobody else would take, and remembered every soldier who had ever stood against them. I had stopped 2 of their men from completing a mission years ago, and apparently, someone in that organization had decided the debt was still owed. "They will come again," Vashka said. It was not a question. "Probably. Then we prepare," she said, and something in her voice had changed completely. The condescension was gone. In its place was something sharper, more focused, the voice of someone recalculating an old plan with new information. Over the following weeks, our relationship shifted in ways I had not expected. Vashka stopped treating me like something fragile she needed to shield from the world. Instead, she began asking real questions, about my training, about the tactics I had used, about the instincts that had kept me alive on Calder's Rock. She was not doing this out of pity or curiosity alone. She was doing it because she had realized, faster than I expected, that the 2 of us together were far more capable than either of us alone. "You move like someone who has been taught to disappear," she said one evening, watching me quietly check the exits of a new room, the way I always did without thinking. "I move like someone taught to be seen. Perhaps that is why the arrangement made us seem such a strange pair. We were never meant to be opposites. We were meant to cover each other's blind spots." I had never thought of it that way before, but she was right. She had spent her whole life learning to stand at the front of a room, to be recognized, to be the calm center that others rallied around. I had spent mine learning to be the last thing anyone noticed, until it was too late for them to matter. Together, we made a strange and effective shape. The next time trouble found us, we were ready for it, in a way we had never been before. It happened almost a month later, during a diplomatic visit to a trade outpost near the edge of Dominion space. The outpost was crowded with traders and travelers from a dozen different worlds, all moving through narrow corridors lined with shops and stalls. Vashka was there in an official capacity, representing her family in talks about a new supply route. I was there as her husband, expected to stay quiet and pleasant in the background, the role I had played so well for so long. I noticed the pattern before I understood what it meant. 2 men who had been standing near a food stall for far too long without ordering anything. A 3rd man who kept glancing toward the corridor that led to our private quarters, then quickly looking away when he thought no one was watching. A 4th who was clearly following the movement of Vashka's security detail, counting steps, timing gaps. I leaned close to her during a quiet moment in the talks, and spoke without moving my lips much, an old habit from years of needing to pass information without alerting anyone nearby. We have company, at least 4, possibly more outside. Vashka did not look up from the documents in front of her, but I saw her posture shift slightly, becoming more alert without becoming obvious about it. This was new. A month earlier, she would have reacted with visible tension, maybe even reached for her blade out of instinct. Now she simply nodded once, calm and controlled, trusting the information I had given her without needing to see it herself. "Options," she said quietly. "We leave through the service corridor behind the meeting hall. It's narrower, harder to follow us through quickly, and it leads directly to the transport bay. And if they are waiting there as well? Then we improvise," I said. "But if I had to guess, they want to catch us in the open, somewhere public enough to control, but private enough that no one interferes too quickly. The service corridor breaks that plan." She trusted me completely, which was something I still had not gotten used to. We finished the meeting with polite, unhurried goodbyes, giving no sign that anything was wrong, and then made our way toward the service corridor, exactly as planned. The corridor was narrow and dimly lit, lined with supply crates and old equipment that outpost workers used for maintenance. It was the kind of place people rarely walked through, unless they had a reason to be there. As we moved through it, I heard the soft sound of footsteps ahead of us, deliberately quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes from people trying very hard not to be heard. "They anticipated the corridor," Vashka murmured. "Or someone told them," I said. "Either way, we're not turning back." 2 figures stepped out from behind a stack of crates ahead of us, blocking the path forward. I recognized the stance immediately, weight balanced low, hands ready, eyes scanning for weapons rather than faces. These were not amateur guards or nervous traders. These were professionals, likely from the same organization that had sent men after us before. "Corporal Reyes," one of them said, his voice calm, almost respectful. "We were hoping to avoid a scene. Come with us quietly, and your wife walks away untouched." Vashka's hand moved toward her blade, but I placed my own hand gently over hers, stopping her. "Let me handle this," I said quietly. "Trust me." She hesitated only a moment, before lowering her hand, something that would have been unthinkable for her a month earlier. I stepped forward, keeping my hands visible, my posture relaxed and unthreatening. To an untrained eye, I looked exactly like what everyone expected me to be, a soft, cautious man trying to talk his way out of a dangerous situation. But I was counting distances, watching hands, noting the slight shift in weight that told me which of the 2 men would move first if things went wrong. "You already know how this ends if you push it," I said calmly. "I would rather it not come to that. For anyone." The man in front smiled slightly, clearly unconvinced by my tone. "You're outnumbered, Corporal. Whatever training you had years ago, you're older now." "Slower." "Maybe," I said. "But I've had a lot of time to think since then, about better ways to end things quickly, without anyone getting seriously hurt. It would be a shame to test that theory here, in front of witnesses, in a corridor, with cameras at both ends." That last part was true, and I watched it land. Outposts like this one were required by trade law to monitor all service corridors for safety reasons, a detail these men had clearly not considered before choosing this location. Their confidence flickered, just slightly, and that flicker was all the opening I needed. I moved quickly, using the narrow space of the corridor to my advantage, closing the distance before either man could react. Within moments, both men were disarmed and restrained, their weapons secured, their movements limited, without any lasting harm done to either of them. Vashka stood behind me the entire time, not because she needed protection, but because she understood, finally and completely, that this was a situation where my particular skills mattered more than hers. Outpost security arrived within minutes, alerted by the very cameras I had mentioned, and took the 2 men into custody for questioning. The remaining figures I had spotted earlier disappeared into the crowd before security could locate them, likely realizing their plan had already fallen apart. Later that night, back in the safety of our quarters, Vashka sat across from me, studying my face with an expression I had never seen from her before. It was not fear, And it was not the quiet condescension she used to carry so easily. It was something closer to respect, mixed with a kind of wonder. "You spoke to armed men without raising your voice," she said. "You convinced them to hesitate, using nothing but words and the mention of a camera. I have trained my whole life to lead with strength, and you led with patience, and it worked better than anything I could have done in that corridor." "Strength isn't always loud," I said. "Sometimes it's just knowing exactly when to be quiet, and exactly when not to be." She smiled at that, a real smile, without any trace of her old assumptions about who I was. "You bowed your head for me 100 times over things that meant nothing," she said. "And yet you never once told me you could do this. Why?" "Because I didn't want to be that man anymore," I said honestly. "I wanted a life where I never had to use those skills again. But some things follow you, no matter how far you walk. I'd rather use what I know to protect the life I actually want, than pretend I don't have it, and lose that life instead." Vashka reached across the small table between us, and took my hand, her grip firm but gentle, nothing like the way she used to hold my wrist to pull me behind her for protection. "On my homeworld," she said softly, "we have an old saying, 'The stillest water hides the deepest current.' I always believed it was only a saying, something poets used to sound wise. I did not think it was something I would ever see with my own eyes." "It's not just a saying," I said. "It's just easy to miss, if you're only looking at the surface." Over the weeks that followed, our marriage changed into something neither of us had expected when it began as a political arrangement. Vashka no longer saw me as someone she needed to shield from the world, and I no longer felt the need to hide the parts of myself that had once made me who I was. We began to work together, truly together, combining her boldness with my caution, her presence with my patience, until we became something far stronger than either of us had been alone. The threats from Scarrow's concern did not disappear completely, not right away. There were a few more attempts over the following months, each one handled with less panic and more coordination than the last, until eventually, whoever was directing those attacks seemed to realize that pursuing us was no longer worth the cost. The attempts stopped, quietly, the way most dangerous things eventually do when they stop being profitable. Vashka and I never spoke about those events as though they were something dramatic or heroic. To us, they simply became part of our story, proof that the version of ourselves we first presented to each other was never the whole truth, and that the truth, once revealed, made us better partners, instead of driving us apart. I still let merchants overcharge me sometimes. I still apologize to furniture I bump into, much to Vashka's amusement. But now, when she watches me do these small, soft things, there is no disappointment in her eyes anymore. There is understanding, and something warmer beneath it, the quiet knowledge that the man who bows his head easily is the same man who once stood calm and unafraid in front of armed strangers, because he had already decided, long before she ever knew him, exactly what kind of man he wanted to be, and exactly what he was willing to become again, if the people he loved were ever truly threatened. And that, more than any title, or bloodline, or old family story about warriors and thrones, is what finally made her see me not as a weak human husband chosen for political convenience, but as someone she was genuinely proud to stand beside, in quiet moments and dangerous ones alike.